Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. Do you play PUBG? Well, the combat and survival video game is banned in India, but it featured as part of the inaugural esports competition in the Asian Games. In fact, Taiwan won a bronze in the event, with China capturing gold and South Korea taking silver. This year's Asian Games is grabbing attention for many reasons. For one thing, the sheer numbers. More than 12,000 athletes from 45 countries are gunning for glory in eastern China's Hangzhou city. They are taking part in 481 events at 56 venues over 15 days. The 19th Asian Games also were postponed and are taking place with a year's delay due to the pandemic. Now, to talk about the significance of these competitions and why these Asian Games are bigger than ever, we are joined by Boria Majumdar, a sports historian and founder of Rev Sports from Eastern Indian city of Calcutta. Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you on the program. I want to start with the question of the size of these games. In fact, these games are going to be bigger, or are bigger, than the upcoming Paris Olympics next summer. What do you make of that?
Yes, you're absolutely right in saying that, because Paris Olympics will have a capped number of athletes at 10,500. The total number of media perhaps will be a tad more, but these Asian Games, in terms of scale, in terms of the numbers, are massive. And for a city which is not even the capital to be able to host this is a testimony to how well they've sort of done so far. And my own experience, my colleagues who are still there, the Indian contingent, I can tell you that they've been very well organized. And what does this say? It says Asia is actually making a statement to the world, because the Asian Games are commercially viable. The Asian Games are now being watched and consumed and appropriated by millions across the world. This is the second best sports competition after the Olympic Games in terms of standard. So in every sense, this is Asia's statement to the rest of the world, is what I would say.
Okay, let's bring it down to the location. What does this say about China's statement to the world? It's come out of more than 2 years of heavy restrictions. It's somewhat of a coming out party for them. And it's also coming at a time when China is struggling economically. What do you think the significance of these games are for China?
Massive, because, 3-4 things here. One, let me take you back to the opening ceremony. Very futuristic use of AI, use of technology, fantastic. Two, look at the venues. Every venue is all sold out. The athletic stadium has 80,000 people every single night watching the finals. Every other venue, be it boxing, be it wrestling, be it badminton, squash, even the lesser known events, every venue is sold out. So it's a testimony to the fact that people of the city, people of the country are involved in these games. It's not a top-down imposition, it's a bottom-up integration. Number three, the athletic performance of China, clear statement of soft power, right? I mean, they're leading the medals tally by 20 times. Number four, in terms of hospitality and facilities and language, for example, we've had a very good games. Everybody who I've spoken to talking about the helpfulness of the volunteers, the helpfulness of the staff, the facilities on offer, training facilities. So in that sense, it's a massive statement by China. They could have avoided a couple of things, the Jyoti Araji race in the 100-meter hurdles. Such things should have been avoided, could have been avoided. But overall, if you ask me, I think China should be very proud of what they've been able to pull out.
Right. And Boria, I want to bring now the focus here to Taiwan. So Taiwan has been within the top 5 in the medals tally throughout most of the competition. We spoke to Zhixuan Chen, a sports commentator and a professor at the National Taiwan Sports University here in Taipei, for his take on Taiwan's performance at the 19th Asian Games.
It's actually beyond our expectation in the beginning. I think the expectation from the sport administration is very conservative in the beginning. But with the game coming along, I think most of Taiwanese athletes, they perform beyond our expectation. I think 3x3 basketball is the biggest surprise. Compared to, regular 5-man basketball tournament, 3x3 basketball is really went beyond everybody's expectation. They won the gold medal. And, basketball is kind of, lots of people enjoy watching and also playing basketball in Taiwan. So I think that's really a boost for the morale.
So, Boria, from almost day one, Taiwan and India have been neck and neck in the medals table. Now, how do you rate the performance of an island nation of 23 million to a country with a population of 1.4 billion?
You know, Divya, this is one comparison that I keep hearing across the world, but I don't think it's a fair one. Three reasons. One, I mean, India never, physical literacy was never considered important till very recently. So 90% of that 1.4 billion does not have access to basic sports facilities. So this whole comparison is slightly skewed. Number two, I am not taking anything away from the Taiwanese performance because I think it's fantastic. Across sport, the way Taiwan has played, we were hearing the professor in 3x3 basket, but in other sports as well, take boxing, take badminton, take some other sports, they've been fabulous. So I'm not taking anything away from Taiwan. Having said that, for an Indian contingent to fight for 100 medals, our best ever performance was Jakarta in 2018 with 70 medals. To top that by about 25 medals and make it your best ever performance, I think both countries should be celebrated, but we should avoid this comparison because it does not really tell you the real picture. For an Indian to access sports facilities, it is way more difficult than what it is in Taiwan, and we should put that in context.
Point taken, Boria. And now I want you to listen to this. We want to find out, where is Taiwan really in terms of becoming a multi-sports country? Here's the take from the sports commentator Vincent Liao speaking to us from Los Angeles in the USA.
Taiwan has done pretty well at the Hangzhou Asian Games so far, with medals in judo, taekwondo, table tennis, weightlifting, among others. These are events that we're traditionally strong in, and you could say that a few gold medal performances are actually better than expected. We also have a few surprise medals in some events that were generally competitive and occasionally find ourselves on the podium, such as gymnastics, golf, tennis, shooting, and swimming. Some of the pleasant surprises are the new mind sport events here in Hangzhou. Taiwan captured the men's gold medal in Go, as well as a few additional medals in esports. Of course, we also saw the exhilarating finish in men's speed skating relay, where Taiwan defeated Korea at the very last second. Taiwan should be able to collect a few more medals down the stretch, as archery, badminton, baseball, and boxing enter the medal rounds of the competition. With baseball being followed closely by the Taiwanese fans, the 4-0 defeat of Korea recently has really been the highlight of the tournament so far.
Okay, so we heard somewhat of a summary of how Taiwan has been doing also in these various sports. But Boria, what does it take for a country to become a multi-sport nation?
Firstly, there has to be synergy across all sections. There has to be synergy across people, government, sports authorities, commerce, as in the business groups, corporates, people like you heading the media. Everyone has to come together and understand the value of sport. Sport cannot be treated as a silo. You are doing a program, a full program on sport. This cannot be one sports bulletin on national TV one day of the week. Then you're not taking your sport seriously. Second, you have to also understand that participatory sport and competitive sport are two different things. Elite high-performance sport cannot define your country. It is universal sport, sport for all, public participation. That's what will make you a healthier nation. And only if that happens will you then become a medal-winning nation. If you only focus on winning medals, it doesn't happen. So it has to be a synergy across every level. Policymakers need to realize that sport is an example of soft power. It can be used to make a statement in front of the World Parliament of Nations. All of these things, Divya, coming together make sport what it is. Think of FIFA, Argentina. Who talks of Argentina? Talk Leo Messi, everybody knows Argentina. Take Usain Bolt. Who talks of Jamaica? You and I both know the poverty in Jamaica. Talk Usain Bolt and the whole world knows Usain Bolt. That's what sport does to you. It gives you a play globally in front of the world.
Now, as we mentioned, esports featured in the Asian Games for the first time in history. Professor Zhi Chen gives his take on why Taiwan managed to nab a medal.
Yeah, I think esport is a very intriguing one because this is the first year it's listed as an official competition. And so it's very weird to see esport in this way, but traditionally, but not in the Asian Games or other major tournaments. It's been in Taiwan civil society for a long time, especially among teenagers and youngsters. And the way they perform in Asian Games this time, they won a few medals. I think that's also a boost for them so that they don't necessarily play for fun. Now they can play for the country.
Boria, why are video games part of a tournament or an event that's usually regarded as showcasing physical skills? What do you make of esports being now part of the Asian Games?
It's not simply about physical skill. Take something like chess, was not physical skill. Take something like bridge, was not physical skill. So it's not simply physical skill that is being showcased. This question about esports being integrated is something that has been debated worldwide. Believe me, it takes a lot of physical and mental skill to be able to keep focus. So when you talk to athletes who are doing the physical drill, take a hockey player. Go and ask a hockey player that when you're playing the 60th minute of the match, are you physically focused and will that win you the game? He will say, no, I've got to be mentally switched on also. So it's a combination of physical and mental. That is what esports also is. You've got to be mentally switched on, physically able to allow your mind to be switched on. So and in India, it's $1 billion plus industry. In the US, it has always been the case. Professor just told us about how in Taiwanese civil society it's been important. I see esports growing and growing, becoming an Olympic sport because it has expanded the sporting ecosystem, brought in newer constituencies of young people, and in that sense is very attractive to corporates.
But in that sense, we heard the professor talk about why Taiwan was doing so well in this sport. But there's a sense that perhaps some nations would have more of an advantage, particularly if they are richer. Is the playing field really even for esports across the world?
I don't think it is even for any sport across the world. Take tennis. I mean, do you have the same number of courts in India? Take hockey. Do you have the same number of courts in South Asia that you have in the West, for example, or in Australia? Do you have the same number of shooting ranges that you have in China, in any of these countries of the global South? So sport is not an even playing field. It is not. It was never. Look at the amount of resources that a China or a US can put in, or even a Britain can put in. Do you see a Maldives or a Bhutan or a Pakistan or any of these countries be able to put in such resources? No. So why single out esports? Yes, there is this debate, and I agree that there will always be a debate. It's like fantasy gaming. Is fantasy gaming gambling, or is fantasy gaming a game of skill? People will be divided all the time. So in this case, I mean, I don't want to denigrate anyone, because it's like, physical education teacher in some countries was being denigrated, physical education. So in America, they changed the term to kinesiology. So why use a pejorative concept or a pejorative term? I think esports has a future. It's already been proved. People want it. The market wants it. Corporates want it. That's it.
Right. So, Boria, I want to take you behind the scenes here to give us an insight of what it took for Taiwan's esport team to get to the games. TaiwanPlus reporter Leslie Liao met with the PUBG squad before their trip to Hangzhou.
PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG, is a wildly popular video game. It's a battle royale that's generated billions of dollars in revenue. The game's objective is simple. Dozens of players occupy a map and eliminate each other until only one is left. But the rules of the game have been modified to level the playing field for all participating teams.
这次亚运模式改成了就会是以竞速竞赛的方式去进行。
But PUBG's shooting components are still there.
可能你在路程中是会有加速靶，让你更快的可以到达这个第一个城镇。
These players spend 9 hours a day practicing as a team, and they're constantly thinking about the game's mechanics in their head, so they need to be dialed in the entire time.
我们上班时间就是从早上11点到晚上的8点这样。每天就是固定的上班时间，然后来这边，然后做亚运的练习这样子。
While teamwork is a vital component to success in PUBG, the team is practically silent when they practice. That's because their chemistry is fine-tuned to near perfection. In fact, a lot of the time their communication is nonverbal.
默契如何？一个眼神，一个动作，
就是把我们原本制定好的路线，然后该打什么，就是尽可能把它打好。
If they can get past their rivals, they'll have a good chance of success. Leon Lian and Leslie Liao in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
So Taiwan clearly has an advantage in this game and perhaps in esports. What do you make of a country leaning into their advantage instead of trying to the scattergun approach or trying to hit across the medal table?
I think it's a very fair call, because if you take Britain, and I'll give you the British example, 1996 one medal in the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games, and 97 lottery funding came in. Certain sports were identified. One, diving. Two, cycling. Such sports were identified, and 16 years later, complete transformation. 2012, the London Olympic Games, 29 gold medals. Rio Olympic Games 2016, 30 gold medals. That's what you do. So for a country like India, do you want to invest in a sport which is costly? No, tennis, perhaps, and look at the standard. Rather, you would want to invest in a sport which is relatively cheaper. So you need to identify and try and sort of be smart. What is doable? Which are the sports your country can play better? Where are the resources? Where are the facilities? Where is interest, public interest, and invest accordingly? So I don't see this as a problem for Taiwan at all. I think they've done well. If they are doing well in a particular sport, you should make the most of it.
You brought this up earlier of sports diplomacy. Do you believe big events like these actually bring nations together, allowing them to talk on the sidelines, or does the competition actually create more friction like we saw in the 100 meters hurdles?
Both. I mean, historically, if you take the Hitler Games of 1936, you will hear the story of Jesse Owens and Luz Long. It's incredible what a story that was. Jackie Robinson and the crossing of the color line in 1947. Politically, the significance of that can never be debated. At the same time, the 1980 Games, the boycott, because of the Cold War. The 1984 Games, the Russian bloc boycott, because of the Cold War. So politically, the Games have always been charged. If I talk to you about Mexico 1968, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, the Black Salute, that imagery will forever be one of the most powerful images in the sports world, not simply in the sports world, in the world at large. So Games have been a platform for political imagery, making a political point. So that will never go. And you know why? Because they're consumed and appropriated by millions across the world. So you have a non-violent platform to be able to do so that you will not have, perhaps, in the political plane. A debate in the UN will not be watched by millions and billions across the world, right? So that is why it will be both ways. So when a Neeraj Chopra and an Arshad Nadeem, who I am very sad that is not competing in China in the javelin, stands together, India and Pakistan holding hands, that's a big telling point. And then Neeraj will congratulate Arshad and Arshad vice versa. What a picture that is. Having said that, the Jyoti Yaraji moment with China tells you that nationalism or hyper-jingoistic nationalism perhaps should be controlled, because that's what sport should not be about.
Right. And speaking of platforms, how much of a platform is this for gender equality? We saw the Afghanistan women's team taking part. Granted that in Afghanistan, they're not actually allowed to participate. And many of these athletes came from abroad, out of Afghanistan, to be able to take part of this. How much do you think sports can help lift women's positions or do for gender equality across the board?
Massively. I will give you one specific example. Parul Chaudhary of India, who won the steeplechase silver and the 5,000 meter gold. She was asked about her experience, and she said, in my village, not a single girl used to wear shorts. If I was there in the village, I would be married off. End of story. And now there is a huge reception awaiting Parul Chaudhary in her village. Similarly, our rugby girls, in their villages, nobody ever played sport. The parents thrashed the girls when they tried playing rugby. And when the government sponsored them and they earned money, the whole village turned to playing rugby, and they are now poster girls. Now, if these are not symbols, stories of empowerment, then I don't know what empowerment is all about. Sport has always been about empowerment. Why is sport so good? It's not, you and I can record this program again. There are retakes. Sport is real, not real. And that is the fun of sport. The only thing in the world, Divya, only thing where you fail in front of 1,000 people, 1 million people, at the same time, you will recuperate, you will recover, and you will come and win in front of 1 million people. Only thing in the world that allows you to fail in public and win in public. And number two, if I'm a Divya Gopalan fan, I will forever be her fan. If I'm a Leo Messi fan, I will be a fan at 6, I will be a fan at 80. Your political preferences change, your girlfriends, boyfriends change, food changes, everything changes. Sporting fandom doesn't change. That makes sport unique.
Nobody can say it better than you, Boria. So I want to bring it now to the idea of identity. We talked about gender identity. Let's talk about a nation's identity. Now, Taiwan has been competing in international events, sports events, under the name of Chinese Taipei. But the name is not considered very useful when talking about Taiwan as a nation state. Sports historian Gerald Gems shared his perspective on it from Naperville, Illinois, in the USA.
Well, that's an identity that was forced upon them. As you probably know, they competed in the Olympics up until 1976, and then China politically maneuvered through the IOC to make its claim upon Taiwan and push them out of the Olympics, and they were allowed to come back in. After 88 was the next time they were allowed to come in, with the proviso that they accept the terminology of Chinese Taipei, which is kind of trying to appease both sides, perhaps not very well, but at least it allows Taipei to compete again on an international level. And it's kind of interesting that I think right now that China is allowing Taipei to compete in the Asian Games on Chinese turf. And in a sense, that gives tacit recognition to Taipei, or Taiwan anyway.
So, Boria, after listening to that, how do you see sports being a marker of national identity for a place like Taiwan?
Massive. Think of the Olympic Games, think of Puerto Rico. I think that's the best example. Not even a country. It's an American principality. But when you sort of march in an Olympic opening ceremony, think of what it does to Puerto Rico. You have Puerto Rico on your chest. Think of Chinese Taipei, Taiwan, whatever you want to call it. I mean, whatever nomenclature you use, the fact is you're marching in an Asian Games opening ceremony in front of millions and billions of people watching you. You're making a statement. When a Chinese Taipei boxer beats an Indian boxer and stands on that podium and wins a medal, that is a marker of identity. That is a statement in front of the world about who you are. And that's what I'm saying. Sport allows you to do that in a non-violent way when the world is watching, when the media is covering, when you and I are talking about it and people writing. That is why sport is what it is and will forever remain what it is.
But at the same time, it can also be used as a geopolitical tool. So how do you think China is handling this? On one hand, it's showing that China is back, it's showcasing itself. But on the other hand, you're seeing events on the sidelines, and you mentioned a few of those where China is showing that, look, we're in charge here, we call the shots.
Yes, and that was unfair. There's no question. There's no debate that what we saw on that night, the Jyoti Yaraji night, when the Chinese who had sort of made a false start and should have been disqualified and red carded, the officials came and red carded Jyoti Yaraji, which was wrong, which was utterly wrong. And action should be taken by World Athletics against the Chinese officials, because you can't run a sports competition. Look, the fact that China refused visas to 3 Indian athletes, these are political issues. In sport, you cannot stop such visas. You cannot say, it will be based on my whims and fancies, even if you are the organizer. Because when you are the host city, you sign a contract. And in that contract, everything is specified very, very clearly, where politics should not come. So if you try to do it that way, I think it's unfair. So what happened in that Jyoti Yaraji night? But after that, yesterday, China, from their official handle, tweeted a picture of the gold medalist along with Jyoti Yaraji and apologized. Now, once that happens, that's sport. That is what it is all about. No one is sort of complaining after that because, look, eventually justice prevailed. And that's what you want. If there is an acknowledgement that there was a mistake, every person makes mistakes. You do, I do. Every human being, the officials also made a mistake. Rectify that, accept it, and move on.
Right, and I want to push forward a little bit to the next Asian Games, the 20th Asian Games, and as countries are going to be bidding for it, what would you say will get that winning bid? Well, what is the one thing, if you had to pinpoint it, that will ensure that a country is well on its way to hosting the next Asian Games?
Sustainability. Simple, one word, sustainability. All you need is to make these games economically viable and not leave behind negative legacies and stadiums which are white elephants, which aren't used, like in Rio. Like I can give you umpteenth examples, Rio 2016, sad story. After all of the spending, if the stadiums aren't used, then there is no point. That's what it is all about. It is about sustainability. It is about how you balance your spend. It is about not shooting over budget. It is about using existing facilities capabilities and integrating within the existing framework. So sustainability is what will define not simply the next Asian Games, but every mega event going forward.
Right, and if we had to finally come back to these Asian Games and as it's wrapping up, what would you say would be the takeaway from this Games? What are people going to remember about this?
In my case, fans back on seats, bums back on seats. I mean, after COVID, after the pandemic, to see people there, camaraderie there, it's people's night out and people's day out or whatever you want to say. The world, Parliament of Nations coming together. Tell me one event after the pandemic where every country has been represented in Asia. Nothing. Yes, in the Commonwealth Games, we saw some countries represented, but in terms of standard, the Asian Games are far higher. There is some kind of normalcy in our world. I know there are pandemic threats and other issues. There will be geopolitical issues, but at least these sports events tell us that beyond everything, there is still a world that believes in peace, that believes in sports competition, that believes in well-being. And sport ultimately gives me a high. That's why I do sport. I live it. I live it just like in the last 30 minutes you and I did so.
Boria, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, my director, Katie, is calling time on this friendly match. But before I go, I want to say a massive thank you to you, Boria Majumdar, speaking to us from Kolkata, sports historian, founder of Rev Sports. Really appreciate your time and all your comments. And like I said, no one says it like you, Boria.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure to be on the show, and hopefully we will do plenty more together. All the best to you, to your team, and to everybody in your station. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And from our connected team to our viewers, thank you very much for your company. Goodbye and stay connected.